Well, hello everyone. Welcome in. Welcome into a Sunday afternoon session. And especially welcome in to a special guest, Jack Fox of Never a Truer Word. Thanks for joining us.
As you're all right, Sunday evening here in the UK, Sunday evening, Sunday night here in the UK. It's pitch black and cold. I've got a cup of tea to warm me up.
Nice. Yeah, we do coffee in the US a lot more than we do tea. I wonder how that changed, over the years.
I cut almost all coffee out of my diet about a year ago and have never looked back. It's when you find out what coffee does to you, it's a bad thing. So maybe that explains some of the things you see around you.
Right. You don't see anything around me. I have an all black background. As I said before, I'm in a guest studio, so I had to go all dark because I don't want to embarrass myself with the mess that you see in the background. But I started following you when you did a collaboration with Defense Diaries with Bob Motta.
Yes.
I missed your volume. Did you mute out, or am I not hearing?
No, you went quiet at my end, so I don't know if there was
we can't be having technical issues already. All right, we got to figure out why I'm not hearing your responses. If it's on my end or if it's on your end. There we go. I hear you now.
You hear me now? Good. Right. Let's hope that stays.
Yes, for sure. I'm hardwired in with an Ethernet cable, so I'm fingers crossed. No technical issues today.
Now let me just. This might go really bad, but I should have had wired as well. But I seem to have been on Wi-Fi.
I'm losing you a little bit, but not a whole lot. Uh-oh, we lost Jack. That's no bueno, people. There we go. Let's come back in.
I'm so sorry, Joe. It might have been my fault you were having lots of technical problems.
Are we good? I hear you now. I hear you just fine now.
Yeah, no, I updated my laptop today. It decided to put me on Wi-Fi rather than my wired connection, which is why want that to happen, Apple? Come on.
Right. Isn't it amazing how they control us more than we control them?
Yes.
Like they do updates without our permission. Like, wait, no, stop. I'm in the middle of a project right now. You can't update right now. No, stop.
Yeah, right. We should be back now. We're good to go.
Okay, good deal. So I started following you when you were on Defense Diaries podcast, and I really appreciate the fact that there are quite a few people out there that do like the body language analysis stuff. They look at interrogations, interviews, but you take a unique approach with listening to the spoken word and looking at the written word of people.
I would love to do body language, but I'm not a visual person at all. I never have been. So I've always been about audio. So what I can hear. And that to me led me to looking at people's words. So I had a career in radio and a lot of script writing in there, which was meant that I had to use my words to persuade people, to convince people of stuff. Wasn't allowed to lie, by the way. I wasn't allowed to deceive by law in this country. You have to be honest when you work in that sector. So I was always honest, but spinning basically. And that led me to look at how other people use their words well or badly to deceive, mislead. Ultimately, I said I wasn't allowed to lie, which leads you to the most common way that we are deceived is actually hearing the truth, but a very small sliver of the truth. Someone would much rather tell the truth than tell a lie. And I think that is one of, when you realize that, it's one of the most amazing things when you look at what someone says and realize they're focusing on just a little element of the truth and hiding all that stuff behind there with their words.
Right. That's fascinating. And what's even more fascinating as it applies to the American justice system right now is that law enforcement is allowed to lie. They're allowed to lie to the people they have in the interrogation room. They're allowed to lie to the public, whatever it takes to accomplish their means.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things I was going to say, because I think, we spoke about this, and we were going to look specifically at law enforcement statements here and how law enforcement deal with things. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is thinking that the law enforcement, they must always be telling the truth. They must always be honest. And no, that's not the case at all.
Right. And so the case that we're going to discuss today is right in my backyard. My hometown is Lafayette, Indiana, which is 25 minutes south of Delphi, which is where in February 13th of 2017, Abby and Libby went missing, and they had a search for them that night. And there was actually a law enforcement press release where Tobe Lesenby, who was the Carroll County Sheriff at the time, said, "We don't believe they're in danger. We're calling off the search." And then the next morning, their bodies were found brutally murdered. And for 5.5 years, we didn't get any real leads in the case. 2 years after the fact, we did get a new law enforcement release. So let's go back a little bit. So right after that February 13th, February 14th ordeal, there were two law enforcement pressers. And it was kind of a joint presser between Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police. But after those first two pressers, almost everything that we got was from Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter. He was the one that was in charge at the pressers. He was the one that was giving us information. He was the one that was going on interviews on television. And we're going to look at one of those today. We're going to look at the one in 2019. So in 2017, we got the audio clip that was down the hill from the bad guy. And immediately all of us, like me, we turned into internet sleuths, and we're like, who is this person that said down the hill? What kind of an accent does he have? Is it an Indiana accent? Is it a Kentucky accent? We don't know, but we're all going to speculate. And then 2 years later, they had another press conference, and they released video of Bridge Guy, the guy that's walking across that railroad bridge. And they said, we believe this is the guy that's responsible. And ultimately, that's what the jury found a couple of months ago, that Richard Allen was Bridge Guy and was responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. But in the meantime, in those 5.5 years, all we had was information from Superintendent Doug Carter.
Yeah, I think one thing to when we look at this is know that if the police are putting him up to talk and do this, he's had media training, which is another way of maybe obfuscating what it is that is going on. And certainly he will have gone into this interview and almost anything that he did with an idea of the message that he wanted to get across. And he will have probably been trained how to take the question that he's asked and turn it into a message that he wants to give. Now, we see that a lot in deception. So if someone is being interrogated, for example, about a crime, and they're asked a question about it, they might just take that off ramp from what they've been asked about and talk about something entirely different to get their point across. So I think that's something that is definitely happening here in this interview.
So this is somebody that has talking points, but he's also interacting with his interviewer. So he might get asked something that he's uncomfortable with in the middle of his talking points.
Exactly that. And the classic example of this is when you see a politician being interviewed, and they're asked something about, but what about the rising gas price? And they'll say, yeah, well, the gas price is important, but what's more important is we've got higher employment in this country than we've ever had before, and my party is the one that did that, and that's why you should vote for us. And all of a sudden, the gas price is somewhere way over there behind us, and we're talking about employment figures. And politicians are, I was going to say, very good at it. They're damn obvious when they're doing it, but others can be just that little bit more subtle and change gear slightly easier.
All right, so let's dive right in. Let's listen to what Superintendent Carter has to say. This is a WISH TV interview in May of 2017. So this is just after, like a month or so after they released the video of Bridge Guy.
On a Thursday morning, a quiet period ends today in the Delphi double murder investigation. It has been more than 2 years now since the murders, and 2 weeks since the release of new clues in the case. State police said they'd wait to say more until new tips came in and give time for the families to absorb the new information. Well, that period's passed now. State Police Superintendent Doug Carter is here. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Scott.
We've been reporting on Daybreak some 3,000, probably more now, tips have come in since the release of the new information. Is any of it different? Is any of it useful?
Well, it's all useful. It's all useful, and it's all, or at least the vast majority of it's different.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thrilled with what's happened since then. We still have a lot of work to do, but we're not near done.
When we
Stop there.
Yep.
So very simple question answer, but I've already got so much here. By the way, I think another thing to remember when you're looking at law enforcement people, they're human. And all the way through this interview, you can see the nerves in this guy, Doug Carter. You can see him gulping a lot. Now, I don't do body language, but I can tell when someone is nervous. I can tell when someone is stressed. We don't know why that stress is. Is that stress because he's lying through his teeth? Could be, because lying is a very stressful thing. Could he just be aware of the gravity of the situation and the messages that he's got to get across, and he's very stressful about getting the right messages across? Again, it could be that, but he's very stressed. And without being unkind to the guy, stress is very useful, because when we're stressed, the words tend to come out not quite as polished as we'd like them to, and that's quite good, because they've got less filter on them there. So he's asked the question there about the new information. Is any of it different? Is any of it useful? And he says, well, it's all useful. It's all useful. So he repeats himself there. So one of the reasons we'll repeat ourselves is because we don't quite know what we're going to say next, because our brain is working there, trying to work out what form of words do I want to give here. He may be thinking, how can I move on to my talking point as well? How can I take this as my jumping off point and go on to what it is that I want to say? But he says, it's all useful. It's all useful. So he's buying himself thinking time. And then he says, and it's all and again, we've got this thinking going on here, because he's not quite ready to say the next word yet, which is why you get the and then he says, or at least the vast majority of it is different. So I think he was going to say it's all different. And then this is, the truth always comes out. He's self-corrected himself there. So he was kind of going to give a blandishment of, nothing bad has happened here. So it's all useful. It's all different. And then he realized that would not be the right thing to say, because it wouldn't be true. So he corrects himself and says, or at least the vast majority of it is different. And then he says, so I'm thrilled with what's happened since then. Thrilled's quite an interesting word, isn't it? Because this is an investigation into the murder of 2 young girls. And thrilling is an interesting word to use in that context, don't you think, Joe? It's not quite
Appropriate.
Sober,
It's not quite appropriate. Yeah.
It's not quite that appropriate for a sober police investigation. I get that. And again, this might just be him sort of leaking what is going on with himself, that they finally think they're getting somewhere, and finally the pressure might be off. So I am thrilled, but it's not quite an appropriate word. I'm thrilled with what's happened since then. Then he says, we still have a lot of work to do, but we're not near done. Now, no secret, Joe and I, we've been passing videos to each other. You've been passing a lot of videos my way and saying, what do you think about this one? What do you think about this one?
Right.
And all the way through this, we're not done is one of his key phrases that he says at press conferences and in interviews. We're not done. I think that's something that he wants to hit. It's one of those points that he wants to hit in every interview, every thing that he does. Now, why that is, I could speculate and say that's probably because I think a lot of the time he thinks he's addressing the killer in the audience. And therefore, this is to keep the pressure up, and to he certainly does not want to convey any hopelessness. Now, I've never been inside a police investigation, so maybe they do think it's hopeless at times. Maybe they do think they can't get a break. But he really wants to not say that, or not say, don't think we're getting anywhere, or yeah, the information's there, but it doesn't mean very much. He wants to keep the pressure up, and so we're not near done. Is one of his talking points. So he's already, as you can see, he wasn't asked how far done you are. He wasn't asked how far along is the investigation or anything like that. He was asked about this information. Was it different? Is it useful? He answers that question, and then boom, he has taken that springboard on to getting across one of his key messages, which is, we're not done.
Yeah, very, very, Very insightful. I hadn't noticed that before. There are certain phrases that he uses that I have noticed, like, I wish we could tell you everything we know, but we can't. He's said that multiple times in multiple interviews, but that one right there is one that I missed. I appreciate that very much.
Well, listen, you're an aficionado of this case, so a question I'd like to ask you is, now that someone has been found guilty, have they told us everything they know?
No.
Interesting.
And I don't even think that Doug Carter ever took the stand, if I remember right, in the trial, ever.
We've got, I don't know if it's the same in America, but here in the UK, for high profile cases, one of the broadcasters might well work closely with the police before the trial, during the trial, to have all that background. They might have footage of interrogation or surveillance or anything like that they won't use while the court case is on, because you're not allowed to in this country. But as soon as a verdict is reached and sentencing is given, there'll be a lot of background information on these big cases put out there. And I hadn't seen anything like that on the Delphi case.
Right.
And I wondered why they were holding a lot of stuff back. I get.
Yes,
but
they are because Judge Gull issued a gag order on the police, on the coroner, on the families, on basically everybody involved in this case. Nobody is allowed to talk about it, and that gag order has not been lifted. So we don't know a lot of information right now. No, there's a lot of information out there that we don't know.
That's interesting.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating to a lot of us who do want to know all of the information out there. And there are still people. This is such a polarizing case. There are people on both sides of it that absolutely feel he's guilty, and there are people that absolutely feel like he's not guilty. And there are a lot of answers that we don't have to help us figure it out, who are still on the fence, like trying to figure out if he's guilty or not.
Yeah. Oh, I can only think of one reason for that. So in our justice systems are of many things the same, but over here, by law, you're not allowed to call to pass any comment as soon as a person's arrested and charged with an offence, all the way through to a verdict in the trial. So if some of the stuff I see from America just blows my mind, because we couldn't. Trials are not televised here, but when reports of a trial come out, you can't comment publicly on what's happened in court that day. You're just not allowed to, whereas as you are in America. But as soon as the trial is finished, it's open season. You can say anything. The only reason you can't do that in this country is if there's another trial to follow, using some of the similar evidence, like maybe another co-accused or another criminal offense has happened, and that is still to be tried. Then sometimes these gag orders exist in our country. Is that what's happening there? Are there more?
Well, he hasn't been sentenced yet. So there's the sentencing portion of the trial to be had, and people are hoping that the gag order will be lifted after that. But there have been gag orders that have been issued for 50 years. Like the JFK assassination, a judge put a gag order on that and said the U.S. can't handle the information from the JFK assassination for 50 years. So nobody can talk about it for 50 years. And it was sealed for 50 years.
Quite an interesting aside. It's got nothing to do with this, but I saw someone made a great point today about the JFK assassination. So there's that CEO that's been murdered in New York. And with all the video surveillance and the internet, we still haven't tracked down the assassin. Whereas in 1963, with no video surveillance, with no camera surveillance, with no internet, they managed to get the guy within an hour.
Right. Yeah. Amazing, huh?
Amazing. Anyway.
All right. You ready to continue with Superintendent Doug Carter? All right.
We first got word, and it was on a Friday that we got word that there would be this new information. Some of the things struck me as unusual. You invited the public to this. You weren't taking questions at that point, again, to wait those a little bit later. And then in that briefing, it seemed like you were speaking directly to whoever did this, with the sense that that person might even be in the room. Yes. Do you think that person was in the room?
I think if he wasn't in the room, he was close by, but I'm 100% convinced he was watching.
Why?
Because of all that's happened over these last 30 months, the information that we had received, the information that we knew, and I hope to one day be able to tell that story.
Stop there.
Yep.
So he's asked, do you think that person was in the room? It seems you were addressing the killer. And he says, I think if he wasn't in the room, he was close by. That's an interesting So he doesn't say yes or no. Typically, if you're asked a yes or no question, then you should expect yes or no in the first few words of the answer. That's a good indicator that you're hearing the truth. So he's asked, do you think the person was in the room? He doesn't say, yes, I think the person was in the room, or no, I don't think the person was in the room, or I don't know would also be a great answer, kind of truthful answer to that. So he says, I think if he wasn't in the room, he was close by. So we don't have that yes or no in there. So I don't think we're getting a truthful answer there. I'm not saying we're getting some horrible deception or dreadful lie going on there. I just don't think he's being straight there with what he was saying. And I think from what I've seen of this interview, there is some well-known statistics that, especially in very serious cases, then the criminal does stick very close to the investigation and does, try and maybe even talk to police officers to find out what it is that they know, or, pay close attention, do a lot of Googling to the investigation and so on. So I just wonder if that's what was going on there. And he doesn't want to give that part of it away for whatever reason. But he does say, I'm 100% convinced he was watching. Someone goes over 100%, someone says 110% convinced or 200% convinced, they're deceiving you there, because you can't go over 100% in reality. So if they go over 100, it's very much the fact they're trying too hard to convince you. You can't be more certain than certain. And he's stuck there at 100%. So yeah, I do think that he did think that person was watching. Interestingly, actually, I've just realized there, he was asked, do you think the person was in the room? And he said, I'm convinced the person was watching, i.e. I think he doesn't think the person was in the room. He thinks the person was watching on TV or watching on a catch-up or so on. He's asked why he thinks that, and the answer is really interesting. Because of all that's happened over these last 30 months, the information that we had received, the information that we knew and hope to one day be able to tell that story. Oh, what does that mean? I have no idea. It's hot air. It's just words to deflect away from the question.
You know what we call that? We call that a word salad.
Yeah,
that's a word salad.
We'll just break it down, because of all that's happened over these last 30 months means nothing. What he's had 30 months worth of hot dinners, or it just means nothing. All that happened is just so vague and so general and so huge and absolute. It means nothing. The information that we had received, the information that we knew, which is past tense. Interestingly, so it's not the information that we know, but we knew once upon a time. Don't quite know what that means either, but it's interesting that it's past tense. I hope to one day be able to tell you that story. Now, I hope there, when someone hopes something, that means they're not 100% sure it's going to happen. So why didn't he just say, one day I'll tell you that story, or one day I'll be able to tell you that story? It's just, I hope. One day, again, we've got this real vagueness. So I hope one day, really vague as to why he doesn't seem at all. He was 100% convinced that the killer was watching that press conference. But here it's just, I hope one day to be able to tell you that story. And again, story can infer something that's a bit fabricated there. So it's just, there is that word salad, like you said, but that real vagueness at the end. I hope to one day be able to tell you that story. Don't think he wants to tell that story ever, and he's kind of hoping that story actually, it never has to come out.
Wow, that's deep. So here's information you probably don't know. In the same county, in Carroll County, in a small town called Flora, about 20 minutes east of Delphi, before Abby and Libby were murdered, just a few months before, there was a fatal house fire where 4 young African-American children were killed in the house fire, and their mother just barely escaped with her life. He was also the main public relations guy for that, and he said the exact same thing. I hope someday we can tell you what we know about this. I hope someday we can tell you. So it's like a common phrase with him. And it's just very interesting.
I mean, one of the things that could be, I said these people are human, and some people get off. I don't mean like it's a bad thing, just is the way some people are wired. in feeling that knowing things that other people don't know makes them feel superior to others. It gives them status in their life. The way I'm wired, I like teaching other people things. So when I know something that someone doesn't know, I like to give that information to someone. That's what psychologically gives me status, if you like. I like when I tell someone something and they go, "Oh, I didn't know that. Please tell me more about that." That's like one of the most satisfying things to me psychologically. I don't know why. It's just how I've always been wired. But other people have different things that satisfy them psychologically, and perhaps it's the having information and not being able and not passing it on gives him his status. It could be that's going on with him.
That's how it feels. On the outside looking in, I'm just an everyday Joe Schmo. That's why I named my YouTube channel that. I'm just an everyday Joe Schmo. On the outside looking in, that's how it feels. That's how it feels like he's just intentionally withholding information just to have that power over us.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I've been openly critical of him in the past. And I really appreciate you coming on and giving us some insights into this particular interview, especially.
Cool.
All right, let's keep going. Let's keep rolling.
You said something during the briefing that struck me, that you feel like the investigators may have talked to him. Do you think that at some point or since then that one of your guys has gotten in front of this person and asked him questions? And if so, then how at that point did it not lead to an arrest, and how could it moving forward?
Well, I think it's likely. I think it's likely. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of subjective opinions. There's a lot of analysis being done, which we're trying to encourage folks to not do those kinds of side-by-side analysis. But I really believe that over time, we're going to have an idea that we were onto something early on. But remember, this isn't a 43-minute TV show. We have to understand that's not just science, but it's also human intelligence, what people know. Somebody knows whose body that is, Scott. Somebody knows. If you take the head off of a person that you know, you'll recognize the body, whether it be your dad, your brother, your uncle, your friend, your neighbor, your coworker. That's the piece we're waiting on. And I believe that we'll get there. There is an extraordinary group of people up there that's doing this work, and I believe they're going to come to a successful resolution.
You mentioned the...
Stop there. He went on way too long there. So what was going on? I mean, you've used the phrase.
That was a long, long speech.
Yes, that was a long speech. Okay, so he was asked interviewers ask compound questions all the time. That's when you ask two questions at once. It's a bad thing to do because you give someone an escape route. They can hold on to the bit of the question that they feel comfortable answering and completely ignore the second question if they don't feel comfortable answering that. And he's asked, you said something during the briefing that struck me. You feel like the investigators may have talked to him. Do you think at some point or since then that one of your guys has gotten in front of this person and asked him questions? And if so, then how at that point did it not lead to an arrest, and how could it moving forward? And he does not at all. He hardly engages with the question there at all, but he certainly doesn't deal with the arrest part of it at all, which I think there's probably a very fair answer to that, which is that we've interviewed so many people around Delphi that we are convinced that at some point we must have spoken to the killer or been very close to the killer, which would be, a fair thing to say, but he completely sideswipes that. And what we get is a very, very nervous answer. So he starts with well, which is an indication he's not going to answer the question. If you ask someone a question and they start with well, that means the well signals, I'm going to change this question slightly. What I'm going to do is pretend that the question you've asked is a bad question. And what I need to do is give you an answer that's not quite the one you were expecting, not quite the one you were hoping for, to explain a little bit about why maybe that's not quite the right question to ask. And you'll see it a lot of time. It happens all around us when you'll ask someone a question, even if you're buying something and it's like, could I get this for less? And they'll go, well, and you'll be like, oh, right, I'm not going to get a straightforward answer. So he says, well, I think it's likely. And he says, I think it's likely again. So again, this is his sort of thinking time, buying time to think tactic that he uses when he's asked a question. He says the same thing twice. So I think it's likely. I think it's likely. But he stutters on I the second time. So he says, well, I think it's likely. I think it's likely. I is the most personal word that we have that we can use. We cannot use a more personal word than I. And if we say I and then something after it, we're joining ourselves to whatever comes after it. And that's a very personal thing for us. And if you see someone stuttering on I before something, it's an indication they may be having an issue inside their head, joining themselves to what it is they're about to say, and that's why they stutter on the I. It's you'll notice people stutter quite a lot, and here on the word I, here he does is I think is slightly, and then we got, you used the phrase word salad. I'm going to nick it and run with it. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of subjective opinions. There's a lot of analysis being done, but that is nothing at all to do with the question that's been asked. So why would you avoid a question if you don't want to answer it? If you don't know the answer to it, or if the answer to it is sensitive or something. So he does not want to answer this question, which is why we've had this repetition of I think is likely, and why we've had this hot air. It's like, you know, a balloon. It looks quite substantial, but then when you actually look at it, it's just full of hot air. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of subjective opinions. There's a lot of analysis being done, which we're trying to encourage folk not to do those. And this is very interesting, not to do those kind of side-by-side analysis. So he's not asking people not to have opinions, not to have subjective opinions. Fair enough. Everyone's allowed an opinion. But he's not just asking for a blanket ban on analysis, just side-by-side analysis. Now, it's got nothing to do with the question, but it's kind of jumped out of his mind while he's in this sort of fight mode or fright mode, and words are just coming out of his head. I don't know enough about the background here to know what side-by-side analysis is that he's talking about.
So what happened real quick with that? What happened was all of us internet sleuths got to solving the case because we didn't feel like the state police were solving the case enough, or Carroll County Sheriff's Office was solving the case enough. So there were Facebook groups and social media groups, Reddit groups, that would literally find somebody that they thought was a suspect and put it side by side with the bridge guy sketch and post it on social media. And there were actually people that were like doxed is the word we use now, but they were actually like kind of attacked because they were named as a suspect that might match bridge guy at the time. So there were innocent people that were being attacked sort of on social media at that point in time.
Right. So that's very sensitive to him for some reason. He does not want that happening because he hasn't just asked for that analysis not to happen, but it's a side-by-side analysis. We have another stutter on I, but I really believe over time we're going to have an idea that we were onto something early on. So I, and then he says, really believe. Again, you either believe or you don't believe. But he really believes, so he wants to convince us that he believes. And again, this is him talking about the fact he wants to get across the competency of the investigation. I think, you know, that's where he's got some sensitivity going on. You've spoke about maybe the lack of progress and the pressure that they felt under if there's Facebook groups and internet sleuths maybe doing a better job than they were, or being seen to do a better job than they were. So I think that's something that's very sensitive to him, causes him stress, which is why he doesn't just believe, but he really believes. And then again, we've got this over time, we're going to have an idea. So over time, what does that mean? You know, like, is that 10 years from now, 10 minutes from now? It's just this very vague thing that some point in the distance this will happen, and we're going to have an idea. Well, they're going to have an idea, great, that we were onto something. So not even, you know, what that was early on. So again, when he's talking about how well he thinks the investigation was going, it's not very convincing about that at all. And then he hits maybe on, again, a talking point. It makes a lot of sense when he probably, part of his job is to deflect some of the criticisms about the police investigation, because he was asked about you know, how you think you might have been near the person that was the killer. Why have you not arrested this person? Tell us about that. And he goes, boom, over somewhere else entirely, and saying, never remember, this isn't a 43-minute TV show. You weren't asked what length of TV show it was, mate. I don't know why you're talking about. And we have to. So that's repetition for thinking. I think he said something he feels really, I need to get my TV show line in here. I need to get this line in about a TV show. But once he's got it out, he has no idea about what it is that he's going to say next. So it's we have to understand that that's not just science, but it's also human intelligence. What people know, somebody knows whose body that is. Well, again, it just doesn't make a lot of interest. It doesn't make a lot of sense, quite like what I said there. But then it goes into this really strange bit where he says, somebody knows whose body that is, Scott. Now, I take it he's talking about the bridge guy video there. Why not just who that is? Why is he focused on the body? And then the next part, somebody knows if you take the head off a person, you'll recognize the body. It could be that what he's saying is don't focus too much on the face, focus on the torso and the legs, but he's worded it very badly. But it's quite brutal language that he's used there. Body is something that we use to describe a dead person becomes a body, don't they? They cease to be a person, they become a body. And take the head off a person is a very violent act that he could be describing there. I know what it is he wants to say, which is don't look at the head, maybe cover the head up and just look at the body and see if you recognize that. But it's very brutal language, especially when what you're doing is, what he should want to be doing there is communicating to someone and getting across this very clearly. I'm asking people not to look too far at the face, but look at the body. Do you recognize that body shape? Do you recognize the way it's walking? Do you recognize the clothes even? That would be a very clear way of communicating your want there. But instead, we've got this real brutal language about someone's body and taking the head off the body. Very, very weird.
Yeah, and weird in the context of the way that the girls were brutally murdered too, with their throats being cut and being unalive that way. I mean, but the other thing that's odd about that is it's in the wintertime and this guy is dressed up in multiple layers, and we know that whether it's Richard Allen or it's somebody else, and whether Bridge guy is the guy that committed the act, a lot of us are still trying to figure that out. But he's walking across a railroad bridge, and so his steps are irregular. So you're not going to recognize this guy's gait. It is an unnatural gait. And the ISP actually said that when they first released the video. The gait is unnatural because he's walking across a railroad truss bridge. And I've walked across some of those trusses. I wasn't brave enough to walk across all of them, but I've walked across some of them, and you don't walk with a natural gait. So even if you take off the head, which, like you said, is a brutal way to word it, then you may not recognize that person. Like the chances of tying that person's gait and body style with those clothes to somebody that is the whole reason that internet sleuths were out there putting side by sides of people that they suspected, which he said, don't do that. He says, he contradicts himself. He says, go see if you recognize this person, and you might think this might be a suspect, but don't do side by sides. A lot of us were stymied by that.
Yeah. And then the next thing he says, so the way we order things can be really revealing. We just tend to order things by saying the most important thing first, and then mention things in decreasing order of importance afterwards. And he says, you'll know you recognize that body, whether it be your dad, your brother, your uncle, your friend, your neighbor, your co-worker. So he immediately goes to family there. And dad is, again, it's a very strange way of doing it. I've seen so many police appeals, and they'll be worded a hell of a lot more sensitively than, is this your dad? Because I don't think that is particularly someone's way of thinking, is it? That could be my father. It's maybe slightly younger than my father. and so on. But is anyone really going to go there and go, is that your dad? Are they asking someone? Do you recognize your dad there more than anything else? Your brother, your uncle, your friend. It's again, don't know why he's ordered it that way. Is he hoping that does he feel that a family is protecting the suspect maybe? And is he trying to bust through it that way, which is why he's gone to family, first of all, dad, brother, uncle, and then friend, neighbor, co-worker at the very end. So he's not hoping for really that someone will go, that's that guy I work with there. And that's the piece we're waiting on. And then I believe, so again, we've got this stutter before he talks about how well the investigation is going on. I believe that we'll get there, and there's an extraordinary group of people up there that's doing this work, and I believe they're going to come to a successful resolution. So once more, he's finishing his answer on how well this police investigation is going, how much belief he has in this police investigation that it will come to. And again, it's a successful resolution. It's not arresting the killer.
Yeah, that is definitely a continuous thread through all of his interviews and all of his pressers, and it makes you feel as a member of the public from the outside in, it makes you feel less confident that they found the right person, that they're just like blindly searching until they find somebody that they can take to trial. That's just kind of how it feels.
No, it would. I always, when I do my analysis episodes, especially on high profile cases, I'll quite often get a bit of feedback, which is, thank you so much for that. I thought there was something off about this guy from the very start, and you've managed to put into words why it was that I felt that way because of the way he was talking, and you've told me why I didn't like that way he was talking. And what you've got there is that he's done what I say, he's gone extra. So the question was about, I can't even remember what the question was about because it was a long word salad. What was the question about? The question was about why did this not lead to an arrest, right? But he's got miles away from all of this, and he's gone extra. He was not asked, do you believe there will be a resolution to this? He was not asked how extraordinary are the people who are working on this. He's put that in. That he was not asked about it, so that's something that he wants to say. So whether we pick up on it consciously or not, we're kind of going, our brains are going, you weren't asked that. Why are you saying this in answer to that question? What are you trying to convince me of? You know, when you meet a bad salesman and you can tell it's a bad salesman because you just feel you're being sold to. I think that's the same feeling that he's giving out here as well, is that, you know, it's making me feel a little bit like, well, why are you trying to convince me that you're doing a good job? You're either doing a good job or you're not doing a good job, but you're trying too hard to convince me that you're doing a good job here.
Yeah, I think you just created my next video clip. You know, when you hear a bad salesman and you know you hear a bad salesman.
I'm always here for the shorts.
Right. But now in the future, looking back to the past, this was in 2019 and we're now five years past this, almost 5.5 years past this. It took them 3.5 years after this interview to arrest somebody. So, you know, what he's saying doesn't ring true to how the facts wound up, whether or not you believe Richard Allen is guilty or innocent. They didn't arrest somebody for 3.5 years after this interview.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about his people.
Right.
These extraordinary group of people that he had. Yes.
Right. And this was 2019. So this was right around the time that Carroll County and Indiana State Police kicked the FBI off of the case. There was something that happened in 2019 and Tony Liggett testified to it on the stand and didn't expound on it because he wasn't asked to expound on it. But there was something happened in 2019 where the FBI was kicked off the case. So, yeah.
Piece of video, and this is only 2 or 3 frames of video, but it shows the movement of the person. It's been asked, and I'm sure it's been asked of you as well, why not release that sooner? You knew right away you had a picture, but a picture is different than video. Why wait that long?
Yeah, a picture is different than video, and a sketch is different than a photograph. So you're right. You're absolutely correct. We'll be able to one day tell you what we know and why we didn't release it. We don't want to show our hand. We don't want to show the complete picture of what we know versus what we think. We have to be very, very careful there. Remember, it's easy to give an opinion if you don't understand the factual basis for what we've done and why. And I don't mean that in a critical sense, but we have to protect the integrity of what we know. And geez, we're going to stay at it.
The scan.
Stop. I mean, this is just, again, he's asked the question of, you talk about the video, and the gist of the question is, why did you not release this sooner? And then the interviewer makes the mistake, there's not really a mistake, of saying, you released a picture, but you didn't release the video, and a picture is different from the video. And he latches on, not to the question of why didn't you release this sooner, but he just builds himself that thinking time by agreeing with the last bit at the end. A picture is different from a video, which is a fact. It's very, very hard to disagree with that fact. So he goes, yeah, a picture is different than a video, and a sketch is different than a photograph. Truth, but this is not what you were asked about whatsoever. So you're right. You're absolutely correct. Again, got this repeating himself here. You're right. You're absolutely correct. I would think at this moment his brain is in overdrive trying to form the words to answer the question of why not release this sooner. And it's having some problems creating the right words that he wants to get out, which is why we're just getting this fact. Yeah, a picture is different from a video. A sketch is different to a photograph. Now, sketches do come up later in the interview. So I think he's pulled words that are of high priority, top of mind for him at the moment, which is why sketches come out there. We'll be able to one day tell you what we know and why we didn't release it. We've got that one day thing coming up again. We don't want to show our hand. I think that's the most honest he's been there at all. And actually, that maybe that should have been the answer to the question. We don't want to show our hand. Therefore, that's why we release things as we do. We want to show, and this is interesting, we want to show the complete picture of what we know. So he's still using this metaphors of pictures and sketches and so on. He didn't say we want to show everything that we know. We don't want to show the complete picture of what we know. So why didn't you just say we don't want to show everything that we know, or we don't want to tell everything that we know? It was we don't want to show the complete picture of what we know versus what we think. So what he's saying there in his words is that they have some complete picture. Does he mean the completeness of what they know? I think he knows something here. And they don't want to let that out at that point versus what we think. Now, that's very interesting. So we know some stuff, we think some stuff, and we don't want to show what we know versus what we think. Why versus what we think? Are you just letting out what you think here? So what we think is all right to let out, but what we know, the complete picture, is not all right to let out. It's not very clear what he means, but he's got some concepts in his head of there. We have to be very careful here. Remember, it's easy to give an opinion if you don't understand the factual basis for what we've done. Help us out then. Tell us. But we have to protect the integrity of what we know. And then this is brilliant. Geez. I think I always say the truth comes out, right? You will leak the truth. Lying, keeping things from people is all very hard. And I think that geez that he does is just like, man, I'm finding this really hard to keep on top of. Yeah, we're going to stay at it. So that's, again, he's just hitting his talking point. So when he's run out of things to say, we're going to stay at it. We're not done. We're going to get there. Look, everything's absolutely fine. Don't criticize this investigation whatsoever. But it's just like, boom. There's some stuff coming out there that he keeps going to photographs and pictures. So he has something that he knows about that's a photograph or a picture that has not all come out there, would be my analysis, my conclusion on what he's saying there, whether that has come out since or whether it will come out at some point. But I'm also interested in the what we know and what we think thing that's going on there, and why that comes into this. Why did you not release this earlier? I don't know.
I think it goes back to your previous analysis that he likes either pretending or actually having real knowledge of matters in the case and not disclosing them to us. Like he holds on to that as a power trip of some sort.
Yeah, it could be. The thing is, that is really easy to say in a non-stressful way. If that's, where you're at, and he must have thought, we're going to be asked questions about why this hasn't come out sooner. And he must be able to say, we want to release the information and evidence that we have in a strategic manner, using everything that we have so that the investigation progresses in a way that we control. But he doesn't do any of that whatsoever.
No,
It's
that would make too much sense. Yeah, that would make too much sense. He has to say it like, I wish I could tell you everything that we know. Someday I will be able to tell you everything that we know. That's just not professional, especially for a law enforcement officer in charge of an investigation of the homicide of 2 teenage girls and 4 Black girls, 4 African-American girls in Florida. That's not professional.
Yeah, I also say, by the way, just thinking about it right now, that Abby and Libby have not been mentioned once, and that rightly or wrongly, his mission here seems to be a police investigation rather than finding out what happened to those girls, rather than obtaining justice for those girls, or anything like that. He's very procedural about all of this, and does not have to have any zeal in him at all, about bringing things to a conclusion for Abby and Libby.
That is a very good point, and that's very poignant, because that's what it should be about. And he's about defending the investigation and the investigators in this interview.
Yeah.
All right. Carrying on.
Sketch. And to be clear, and you did clarify this after, but in case folks didn't hear it, you don't want them to look at both sketches anymore. You only want the newly released sketch, correct?
That's correct. But remember, a sketch is not a photograph.
Right.
It's something similar to a resemblance. And the likelihood of this being something between the two is probably pretty strong. But again, that's a subjective opinion based upon what I believe.
And certainly you've shown frustration at the.
Again, what? He has been asked questions about sketches and photographs, but he does get very stuttery in talking about photographs, resemblances, sketches. There's something a bit sensitive going on here for them. You only want people to look at the newly released sketch, correct? And he says that's correct. And then, but remember, and now that is quite a phrase of status, and again, controlling. Remember, I know things that you don't. I need to remind you to think logically, or to know the difference between a sketch and a photograph. But remember, a sketch is not a photograph. I don't think any of us had forgotten that, dude, to be honest with you. But so I don't know why you're pointing it out. But it's something similar to a resemblance. Now, how vague is that, right? Something similar resemblance. Huh? Well, that is just mush. That really is just mush. And the likelihood of this being something between the two is probably pretty strong. So we've got likelihood probably pretty strong. Again, there's no conviction here from what he's saying. I'm kind of getting the feeling that because one of the things that, rather than just picking on certain words, sometimes picking on certain words, that makes me sound like a terrible person, but rather than just picking on certain words, look at the patterns of speech that are coming up from the guy. And when he talks about the investigation, he's got 2 patterns. One is this vagueness, the vagueness of the likelihood probably pretty strong. But again, that's based on my subjective opinion. That's really vague. There's nothing solid in that whatsoever that he's saying. But then he will finish with that solid. But the investigation is going really well and we will reach a conclusion. I think at this point, the investigation is floundering. It's in his words there that they're trying everything. They've got sketches, they've got photographs, they're releasing bits and bobs. But his words are so vague on this. He's not, in his words, he's not convinced this is going to lead anywhere. But then when he does say this is very solid and this is going to go somewhere, that's when he uses these overly persuasive words to to persuade us that everything is fine. I don't think it is fine at this point. I don't think it is, because his words around the investigation are not strong and certain at all.
Very well spoken. And on the outside looking in, and looking backwards now in hindsight, because that's 2020, we can agree.
The killer, at the fact that it takes a long time sometimes to find this. The families have got to feel frustration as well. And one question that occurs to me, if they are fielding rumor that you said you don't like, that you could head some of that off by sharing some of the grim things that a family shouldn't have to share. Why is it that we don't know how these girls died? Why is it that we don't know if, for instance, they were sexually assaulted?
Because only the killer knows that, and so do we. That's why. That's why, and you're right. It's the frustration for the family is something I can't even begin to fathom or understand. And we've tried very, very hard to stay connected with them, Scott, throughout this entire process. But remember, while people starve for information, particularly for sensationalized events like this, we can't show our hand. We just can't.
Will there be a point where things...
First things first. Last things first. We can't show our hand. We just can't. Now, I get why that is a perfectly valid tactic for law enforcement. And if that is your perfectly valid tactic, then as you're going into an interview to talk about it, then that should be, the first thing you say, rather than all of this. They talk about a controlled release of information. And why it's there. It is all there, and it makes perfect sense. There are always things about a crime that the police will hold back because they don't want false confessions coming through. And if someone does make a confession, they want to find out, if it is, if that person has inside information that has not been released public. It's a classic thing to do, but he's so defensive of it. He starts the answer almost firm there, because only the killer knows that, and then it's and so do we, and it's like, oh my god, okay, I get that, but that again is showing his I want to know things. It would be absolutely fine for him to say, because these are things only the killer would know, right? But then he has to say, I know them as well. I've got all this information that I'm not sharing. And then you're right. Now he says, we've tried very hard, very, very hard, by the way. So not just hard, but very, very hard to stay connected with them through this entire process. So tried is in the past tense. That means they're not trying anymore. They have tried and given up to stay connected with them. So I think I kind of think this is true from what I know about the case, but the family sort of have given up on the police and had a lot of frustration around the police. And he's saying they've failed there because the word try always suggests failure. And just when he has an opportunity to show some concern for the families, he says throughout this entire process. So that's exactly what I was saying, that he's talking about the process, the investigation, and this is not for him about bringing justice, bringing peace, bringing some settlement for the families or anything. This is all about his investigation process. But remember, well, people starve for information. So again, he's doing his, I know better than you. You have to remember something I'm about to say. We can't show our hand. We just can't, which I've already dealt with.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to the public, to most of the public. If you want to say we want to control the information we release, and we all get that. You want to hold something in hand, but the probable cause affidavit was sealed for at least 30 days and maybe 60, and that's public information. So they've just been so reluctant to share information in this case that it just makes a lot of people leery about what we do get, the information we do get.
Yeah, I think as well, there's ways of what he's almost giving out here is all the information that they've got that they're not sharing. There's no sense of competence in it at all, and putting a lid on this and kind of saying, this is where we're at, this is where the investigation is at, and there's no humanity or humility there either with, I understand why all these questions are there. I understand people would like it to go faster. So would I. Nothing more. I would like them to have the killer behind bars right now, but that's not where we're at. This is what we are doing. But there's none of that there whatsoever. It's that slightly arrogant tone that's going on.
Right. Very well said. And it feels protective of the investigation and the investigators rather than protective of the victims and the victims' families and finding justice for them.
Yeah.
All right. Where are we going to go? Here we go.
Change because it's been 2 years. You've changed strategies now. You have to be looking down the horizon if you don't get the resolution you want. You may think it may be because people want to sensationalize things. I've heard from people very close to those families who say, we're tired of answering Facebook posts about, did this happen? Did that happen?
Right. I can't understand their frustration, but we can stay connected with them. And I didn't mean sensationalism in a negative sense at all, because I'm thrilled about what you've done, what you've allowed us to do today, because this is why we'll be successful. This is why we'll be successful. But we can't turn this in to a wide open schematic of what we know and why. We just can't. But I believe that one day we'll be able to.
You've been involved in investigations that have led to convictions. You've been involved to some have ended in frustrating cold cases. Do you think someone will go to trial for this case someday?
Yes.
That's your superintendent of the Indiana State Police, Doug
There we
Carter,
go.
talking about a very difficult tale.
All right, hold on.
Delphi
I'll
double
pause.
murders, Abby Williams, Libby German died just a little more than 2 years ago. We'll continue to look.
There we go.
I mean, do you really want me to say anything else? Because it's the same old patterns we're seeing again and again and again. It's just, there's something in 911 calls. If a guilty person makes a 911 call, they quite often will ingratiate themselves with the police. So they'll be very polite when they make the call, and they'll be so thankful and so on. And the reason they're doing that is they're guilty. They don't want anyone to think that wasn't a nice person that called, or that person didn't seem to have time for me. And that's what he's doing, the opposite of that there. It's the police thanking this interviewer. He uses the word thrilled again. I'm thrilled about what you've done. You've allowed us to do today, because this is why we'll be successful. This is why we'll be successful. So we've got that repetition again. But I've got to say, we've now seen all the interview. If you were a viewer, would you know what it was that he wanted you to do? Is it do you identify? He hasn't asked, if you know who this person is, then call this number. He did say you might recognize this person. I'm not a police person, but I would be saying, do you recognize that person? And can you think back to the time? Did they start acting strangely, or go missing for a day, or anything like that? There's no joined upness there at all. This
is within a month and a half or so of when they released the new video of the down the bridge guy. So that's a really good point, because why aren't you saying, if you recognize this guy, and he does say in this interview, you might recognize this as your father, your brother, your uncle, your coworker. What are you supposed to do?
Yeah. What are you supposed to do? And it's what else are you supposed to think? This is all about managing the image of the police department here, and managing the image of the investigation, and telling everyone this is going to work out. I think potentially his strategy, and I saw the press conference before this. I think his strategy, or the investigation strategy at this point, might have been to unsettle the killer. So releasing the video, getting the killer, edgy, because if someone recognizes me in that video, then I'm done for, and addressing the killer specifically. But and this is why his talking point is, we will get there, we will get there, we will get there. There are things that we don't know. Again, that might make the killer edgy. Oh my God, there's, the investigation is, they've unearthed things about me. They're coming to get me. They want the paranoia setting in, so this person starts making mistakes, or fesses up, or whatever it is. But he's just not hitting that with any sort of regularity, with any strength at all. And so therefore, we just get this vagueness on, which is going to, Erin in the chat used the phrase, he's selling, he's not telling. So he's doing the salesman job of going, we're doing great, everything's going great, don't come criticizing us, this is not a 43-minute television show. Instead of just explaining what's going on with the investigation, and what he wants is for the killer to be watching this because they think the killer is sticking close to the investigation, then just getting those little bits out there and really hitting those marks with some stuff that would make the killer feel like, oh my God, the net is closing in on me here. But it's not, it's just he gets too defensive. I think as well, so I think as you watch that, you can see how nervous he is. He's gulping in big breaths and he's breathing quite fast and so on. And he says, I'm thrilled about what you've allowed us to do today. Is he thrilled that he's been on TV? Is he thrilled that he's been the center of attention? Is he thrilled that he's turned up on TV going, I know all this stuff that other people don't know. One day I'm hoping I can tell you, potentially.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I don't have words. You've said it all. That's and when you first picked this 6-minute interview, the 6-minute video for us to review, I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be done in like 20 minutes. And here we are over an hour into it. And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I'm glad
sorry, I can go on.
You
I'm just going to say, it is, if you actually just look at what someone says, you know, I've got the transcript of the interview here. I think I printed off about 6 pages worth of it. And about half of that is the questions that are being asked rather than what he says. But when you delve into the words, the word patterns, the repetitions, the stutters and so on, it's amazing what you can pick up. And what I tend to, so I don't have one word that means, or one phrase, never says that someone's lying or someone's deceiving us or anything like that. But the more we hear from someone, the more patterns we build up. So if you were to say to me, right, having looked at that, at the end of that, what's going on with this guy? I've got a really good idea of what's going on because he's continually repeating the same patterns of words and answers as he talks.
right, and those are all things that we kind of instinctively knew. I instinctively knew, and some of the people in my circle instinctively knew about Indianapolis or Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, but we couldn't like quantify. So you've quantified that for us today. And I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome, Joe.
And anybody who hasn't subbed up yet, I dropped your link in the chat. So everybody sub up if you're not subbed up yet to Never a Truer Word with Jack. And hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Take care and have a great holiday season.
You too, Joe. Thank you.
All right. Later.